Welcome to the Emisarios Unidos de Luz channel. If you enjoy this near-death experience story, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. Now let's start with the story. I accidentally took my housemate's medication, thinking I was taking the medication prescribed for me. My heart began to beat hard in my chest, and not realizing the mistake I had made, I decided to lie on the lounge for a while. Within seconds, I was drenched in sweat, and my breathing became increasingly difficult. Suddenly I was out of my body and looking down upon it from my position near the ceiling. As I hovered above my body, I experienced the most profound serenity and lucidity, such that it felt as though I had awoken from a dream into reality. In the spirit body, I felt released from the shackles of my earthly existence and from having to pander to the needs and desires of a body. In the spirit body, I experienced an incredible lightness of being, an indescribable peace, joy, and euphoria that far exceeded the pinnacle experience of corporeal life. As I basked in the liquid gold rays of the sun in the realm of spirit, I noticed that the colors of everything in that realm appeared more vibrant and variegated, and of an ethereal spectrum. As I began to remember how and why I arrived in the realm of spirit, my sense of peace and happiness was soon displaced by feelings of concern for my family, who would arrive home to find my dead body reposed on the living room lounge. As I anxiously contemplated the possibilities, my thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the sight of two spirit entities speaking in the distance, and as they conversed, I was able to discern that it was I and the topic of my future that the two beings were discussing. As those propitious beings deliberated matters concerning my destiny, I became aware of a portal beneath me, and I knew instinctively and by its appearance that the portal was in fact an entrance to the realm of the damned. When I looked upward, however, I was able to see a pathway made of pure translucent gold, and I knew immediately that that footpath led to heaven and to the throne of God. While my fate was being decided by the enigmatic beings in that place of abeyance, in that chasm between heaven and hell, I experienced a certain uneasiness knowing that my destiny was poised so precariously, yet the disquiet I felt paled in significance to the dread and foreboding I felt when I imagined the initial shock, the ensuing sorrow and despair, and the emotional scars that would be sustained by my family upon the discovery of my dead body. With no idea as to how I was going to achieve my goal, I resolved within myself at that moment that I would indeed return to it and to my earthly life. God help me, I cried in my feeling of helplessness, and as I cried, I could feel my spirit body being drawn forward in flight towards an uncertain destination, as if by an invisible force. Not long after, I found myself hovering above the roof of the family home, and even from that height, I was able to see through the roof to my body lying lifelessly on the living room lounge. In merely thinking about reuniting with my body, I could feel my spirit body being drawn to reunite with it. Not long after reuniting with my body, I opened my eyes to the world I had left behind, but my body reverted to its state of equipoise. As I lay on the lounge in a state of calm, I thought about all that happened during my out-of-body experience, and in particular, I remembered the happiness, the peace, and the joy I experienced in the realm of spirit. As much as I would have loved to remain in that heavenly realm, I thanked God for helping me in my time of need and for helping me find my way back. I wondered about the spirit beings who deliberated over my fate, and from what I was able to sense from their energy, I have since concluded that those beings were beings of light or angelic beings that were working as emissaries of God. I eventually found out from a doctor that what I experienced was a chemically induced cardiac arrest, and by the grace of God, my mistake didn't cause permanent damage to my heart. The end of Story 1. Story 2. In my youth, I considered myself a devout Christian, but by the age of 18, in my growing disillusionment and mistrust of Christianity and of religion in general, I came to despise Christians and to assert the futility of religion altogether. At the age of 18, however, I had my first brush with death when I was involved in a car accident, and because I came so close to death's door as a result of that accident, the question of my salvation began to consume me. My fear was compounded by my concern that I was already counted among the damned as a result of the pact I made with Satan at the age of 15. In that agreement, I received what I asked for in exchange for my soul, and as a result of that Faustian bargain, I believed that my soul was already sold to and owned by Satan. At the age of 18 and after my brush with death, my anxious preoccupation about my soul's destiny induced a state of perpetual edginess that affected every aspect of my life. I reasoned that changing jobs might provide the necessary distraction that would help me cope with my worries and fears. After finding a new job, I moved to my aunt and uncle's house to be closer to the place of work, but the job offer was retracted, leaving me with little else to do other than to sit quietly with my thoughts. Having so much spare time with no objective or plan only served to compound my worry and anxiety, and it was in order to distract myself from my worries that I began to peruse my aunt's bookshelf for a book to occupy myself with. As I browsed the bookshelf, the book The ABC of Fasting caught my eye because, at the time, I had no idea what fasting meant, and the title alone roused my curiosity. The book claimed that fasting is the best method to establish a powerful connection with God and with the Spirit, and I reasoned that I needed to make such a connection to beseech God for my absolution. I decided also that while I was fasting, I would read the Bible to augment my efforts, but in reading the Old Testament, I became discouraged, as I had no idea how I was going to acquire the animals needed to perform the ritual of atonement. My hunger exacerbated my despair, and yet my thinking became incredibly sharp as a result of the fast. My mental acuity became so honed that I could recall events from my entire life with extraordinary clarity, but rather than being inspired by the Spirit of God, I was increasingly afflicted by thoughts of self-condemnation and recrimination. I experienced joyful moments where my spirit would leap with hope and joy, but later I would face a barrage of thoughts set on undermining my levity. As I lay in bed, specters would surround me and ruthlessly scorn me, based on the acts of evil I had committed in the past. And even understanding my proclivity to judge myself harshly and with severe prejudice, they made outlandish accusations and indictments for things that neither I nor any other person could possibly be blamed for. The specters reminded me that since I had already made a bargain with Satan years ago, there was no escaping my destiny of perdition. I believed, however, that if I atoned for my sins and received God's forgiveness, my spirit might yet be saved. Without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness, I read in Hebrews, and on the 8th day of my fast, I called my mother and expressed my anxiety over the fact that I would not be able to find or pay for an animal to sacrifice to God as an act of contrition. My mother explained that since we were in the dispensation of grace, it was no longer necessary to sacrifice animals for the forgiveness of sins. After speaking to her, I began to read the New Testament, and from reading the New Testament, I was able to deduce that Jesus sacrificed his life so that sins would be forgiven through heartfelt prayer to God, and without needing to perform gratuitous rituals such as the ritual sacrifice of animals. As much as the promise of salvation as discussed in the New Testament filled me with the hope, however, I still wanted someone to reassure me that the salvation of my soul was indeed possible. It was with that goal in mind that on the 12th day of my fast, I began to discuss with my aunt what I had been reading about in the Bible, with the hope that her words would inspire and encourage me. I began to discuss with my aunt what I had read concerning the power of the Holy Spirit, but my hope for her solace was soon thwarted when my aunt began to yell, "Enough with that talk about the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is the work of the devil. You'll go insane or be damned to hell to involve yourself in such things." Perplexed by her reaction, I retreated into my thoughts as I reflected upon her words and the possible reasoning she drew upon to arrive at her conclusions, which seemed to contradict my interpretation of the Bible concerning such matters. Our discussion didn't stop me from believing in the power of the Holy Spirit and its potential to sanctify my soul, and my aunt, sensing my tenacity to delve even deeper in my investigation of the subject, was terse with me over the days that followed. My aunt's vexation over my interest to learn more about the Holy Spirit and to continue fasting burned so ardently within her that on the 16th day of my fast, she made it clear that abandoning my interests was requisite for my continued accommodation at their home. Although I didn't agree to the terms of her ultimatum, I didn't dare discuss the subject of the Holy Spirit or the subject of fasting with her from that day onward. Fasting itself became increasingly difficult, such that on the 20th day, I started to get strong cravings for foods that weren't so easily dismissed. I assumed, albeit incorrectly, that for a fast to be considered a true fast, it would have to endure for 40 days, yet as motivated as I was to follow the example set by Jesus, on the 20th day of my fast, I decided it was time to stop. "I have done all I can, and I am entrusting you with my soul and my salvation," I prayed, and with my eyes closed as I prayed, I began to have the most vivid or lucid dream. In that dream, I found myself sitting in a chair that floated above what appeared to be a portal through which I was able to identify a fiery pit. As the tongues of fire that rose from the portal threatened to envelop me, I could hear the voice of Satan accusing me and reminding me of all the evil I had committed throughout my life. In that moment, I felt powerless to defend myself, as all that he accused me of were sins I did indeed commit. As I sat there feeling dejected and defeated, I received a flash of inspiration in the form of a childhood memory of my mother instructing me to close my hands in prayer. With no other recourse, I closed my hands to pray, and as I prayed with my hands clasped together, Satan took a step back in retreat, and I realized at that moment that the simple gesture weakened him, or weakened his power over me. As I prayed with my hands folded, I could feel a powerful force trying to separate them, and I had to focus all my will and all my effort to keep them together. I was at the end of my tether from the effort of trying to keep my hands clasped, and it seemed that in spite of my focused effort, the forces that were fighting to separate them were about to win. Out of desperation, I cried out to God in a voice that seemed to echo throughout the universe, and as I yelled, I began to move through space at warp speed away from Satan, the chair, and the portal to hell. After a few moments of traveling through the darkness, I began to see a light in the distance that was fast approaching. "Is it really you?" I asked as that light, the glory of God, surrounded me. It was then that I saw Jesus, dressed in an absolutely white robe. His robe was so amazingly white, which starkly contrasted with his vibrant black hair. Jesus' cheeks appeared acne-scarred and gaunt, yet he didn't have a beard as I had assumed he would have. When I looked into his eyes, however, they appeared as flames of black fire, and it was as if I was looking into another universe within those eyes. In his eyes, I saw a cosmos infinite and boundless, and it was a cosmos of pure and boundless love, a love that touched the very core of my being. As I gazed into that boundless and infinite universe of pure love, the power of that love blew me backwards with such force that I thought I was being propelled across the entire cosmos. Suddenly, I was flying towards the ceiling in my apartment, and I could see my body on the lounge chair below me. It caused a lot of discomfort to re-enter my body after having experienced the glory and magnificence of Jesus. The question of why Jesus didn't have a beard was a question that remained in the back of my mind, and it was around 3.5 months after the NDE that I received the answer to that perplexing question. While reading my Bible one day, I came across verses that stated that when Jesus was brought before Pilate in the days before the crucifixion, people tore tufts of hair from Jesus' beard, and the facial scars that were similar to acne scars were as a result of his beard being torn from his face. After my out-of-body experience, my mother gave me an account of an NDE that she had years before, and in her account, she described Jesus exactly as he appeared to me during my NDE. One night while working the night shift at a convenience store, a very attractive man walked into the store, approached me, and asked, "Aren't his eyes the most wonderful thing?" "Absolutely," I replied as the man stood there smiling. With a smile on his face, the man then blessed me and walked out the door without purchasing anything. I can't help but think that that man was actually an angel.